The contract was for 14 days. 14 days aboard the derelict oceanographic vessel Andromeda, conducting a remote systems diagnostic and securing the claim for my employer. The pay was $37,000. After taxes, enough. More than enough to clear the debt that had been chewing on my life for 3 years. That was the only reason I took the job. The reason I was on a small, pitching cutter, slicing through the gray swells of the lower Atlantic, 1,000 miles from anything. My name is Elias Vance. I used to be a chief engineer on container ships. Now I do this. High-risk, high-reared salvage consultancy. It sounds better than cleanup crew for rich men's mistakes. The Andromeda appeared on the horizon at 10:47 a.m., a smudge of white against a deeper white sky. It wasn't a derelict, not in the traditional sense. It looked pristine, too pristine. My contact, a man named Kaito from the corporate office, had been specific. The ship's automated beacon activated a week ago, a standard distress loop, but the Andromeda was decommissioned and sold for scrap 5 years ago. The paperwork is clean. The ship you're going to shouldn't exist. The cutter's skipper, a laconic Greek named Nico, maneuvered us alongside. The Andromeda rose out of the water like a cliff face, its white hull immaculate, no rust, no algae. There was no name on the stern, just a blank space where the letters should have been. The air around it felt still, a pocket of calm in the restless sea. "Good luck, Mr. Vance," Nico said, his face grim. He didn't like this. The winch whined, lowering me and my gear onto the main deck of the ghost ship. My boots hit the metal with a solid clang. The sound was swallowed by the silence. There was no one, no crew, no signs of struggle. The deck was clean, hatches dog-tight, railings gleaming. It felt less like a ship and more like a model of a ship. I unslung my pack and did a quick perimeter. Check. Port side, starboard side, aft. Nothing. The bridge doors were unlocked. I stepped inside. The bridge was sterile. All the electronics were dark, except for a single small monitor in the corner, displaying a looping message. "Systems diagnostic required. Please initiate protocol." Below it, a slot for a keycard. My keycard, the one Kaito had given me. I found the previous contractor's quarters easily. The name on the door was Barlow, A. Inside, it was like a hotel room no one had ever stayed in. The bed was made, a single book on the nightstand, but on the desk, next to a cold mug, was a thick logbook and a single laminated sheet of paper. The heading on the sheet read, "Initial Procedures and Obligations." Below it, a list. 1. Your contract begins the moment you swipe your keycard at the bridge console. Your 14 days start then. Do not be late. 2. All interior doors, with the exception of the exterior hull doors, must remain unlocked between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. 3. All interior doors must be locked and bolted between 6:01 p.m. and 5:59 a.m. Use the deadbolt, not just the latch. 4. The galley is to be used only between 7 a.m., 1 p.m., and 7 p.m. Food may be consumed only within these 30-minute windows. 5. The aft observation deck is off-limits at all times. Do not approach the door. 6. The main sonar array in the lower lab is not to be activated under any circumstances. 7. A full inventory of all non-perishable food stores in the galley must be conducted every 6 hours. The count must match the previous count. Log any discrepancy, no matter how small. 8. No mirrors are to be used on this vessel after sunset. All reflective surfaces in personal quarters are to be covered before 6 p.m. 9. You will hear sounds. Scraping, tapping, or knocking on the hull is normal. Do not investigate. Do not respond. 10. If you see a figure on the deck, through a window, or on a camera feed, it is a thermal reflection. It is not real. Ignore it. 11. Radio contact with the mainland is only permitted between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Channel 8. No other channels are to be used. 12. Personal effects are not to be removed from your assigned quarters. 13. The vessel's logs are for reading only. Do not write in them. 14. At the end of your 14-day shift, you are to leave this list on this desk for the next contractor. Do not take it with you. I read the list 3 times. It was absurd. A joke from Barlow, maybe, but the room felt too serious for jokes. I picked up the logbook. The first entry was dated 14 days ago. Day 1. Vance's predecessor was Barlow. The rules are his. I'm told he was thorough. The ship is quiet. Too quiet. Inventory at 1,300 hours, 412 cans. All accounted for. The next entry was from the same day. Inventory at 1,900 hours, 412 cans. This is going to be a long 2 weeks. I closed the log. My watch read 11:18 a.m. My shift hadn't started. I still had time. I walked back to the bridge, my footsteps echoing in the sterile corridors. I found the galley. It was stocked, shelves groaning with canned goods, all with the same generic white labels. No brands, just contents: peas, corn, beef, water. I counted the cans on one shelf. 34. I counted them again. 34. The rule was already in my head. I went back to Barlow's quarters. The mirror on the wardrobe door was covered with a gray wool blanket. I checked my watch. 11:43 a.m. I had a little over 6 hours before I had to start worrying about doors and mirrors. I went to the bridge. The monitor still waited. I took a breath. $37,000. I slid the keycard into the slot. The screen changed. Welcome, Elias Vance. Systems diagnostic initiated. Estimated completion, 14 days. And at the bottom, a small timer appeared. 14,000,000. It had begun. My first 6 hours were methodical. I mapped the ship. It was a standard G4, class research vessel, 3 decks above the waterline, 1 below, crew quarters, labs, galley, engine room, bridge, all clean, all empty. The only thing out of place was the lack of personal touches. No photos, no books, no stray coffee mugs. It was a ship without a crew. At 1:00 p.m., I was in the galley. I opened a can of corn and ate it cold, standing over the steel counter. Then I began the inventory, shelf by shelf, can by can. I wrote the totals in a small notebook I'd brought. Canned vegetables, 150. Canned meat, 120. Canned fruit, 80. Bottled water, 62. Total, 412. The number from the log. At 7:00 p.m., I ate again. A can of beef, tasted like salty paste. I did the inventory again. 412. The number was exact. It was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. At 5:59 p.m., I walked the corridors, locking and bolting every interior door. The clicks of the deadbolts sliding home were loud in the gathering gloom. I was sealing myself in. In my new quarters, formerly Barlow's, I took the blanket from the wardrobe mirror and hung it over the bathroom mirror. Then I covered the one on the wardrobe door. The room felt darker, smaller. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened. At 9:15 p.m., I heard it. A faint scraping sound from the port side of the hull. It was rhythmic. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. Rule 9. It was normal. I picked up Barlow's log and read. His entry for his first night was just 1 line. The scraping started at 2,100 hours. It is not normal. I put the log down and lay on the bed, fully dressed, waiting for the 14 days to pass. The second day was a repeat of the first. Inventory at 1 p.m., 412. Inventory at 7 p.m., 412. The scraping started at 9:16 p.m. I timed it. 1 scrape every 45 seconds. I did my radio check at 2 p.m. with the dispatcher, a woman named Jaina. Andromeda *. This is dispatch. Come in. Her voice was clear, professional. Dispatch. This is Vance on the Times Andromeda *. All quiet. Systems diagnostic is running. No issues to report. Copy that, Vance. Anything unusual to report? I thought about the rules, the inventory, the scraping. No. All standard. Understood. Check in tomorrow. Same time. The line went dead. I didn't mention the rules. They felt like a test. If I told her, she'd think I was unstable. I needed the money. The third day, The routine broke. I was in the lower lab, a space filled with dormant oceanographic equipment. In the center of the room was the main sonar station, a large, dark screen surrounded by controls. Rule 6, do not activate. I was just looking, making sure no lights were blinking, when I noticed a door set into the far wall. It was unmarked. I checked my map. It wasn't on there. I tried the handle. It was locked. Of course, but I felt a pull from it, a cold curiosity. I forced myself to walk away. Back in the galley, I did the 1 o'clock inventory. 412. I was about to leave when I noticed something on the floor. A single can of peas. It was sitting in the middle of the aisle, between two shelves. I had just counted those shelves. I was sure of it. I had counted every can twice. My heart hammered against my ribs. A discrepancy. Rule 7. Log any discrepancy, no matter how small. I took out my notebook. My hand shook as I wrote, 1,300 hours. Found. One can of PEAS on floor. Total count now 413. I picked up the can. It was cold, the label perfectly smooth. I put it back on the shelf, between the corn and the other peas. I counted again. 412. The can on the floor was gone. I blinked. It had been in my hand. I was sure. I looked around the empty galley. Nothing. I did the entire inventory again. Shelf by shelf, can by can, 412. The number was perfect again. I felt a cold sweat on my brow. I left the galley and didn't go back until 7 p.m. At 7, I ate quickly and started the count. 412. I was breathing a sigh of relief when I got to the last shelf. Behind a stack of beef cans, pushed to the back, was a can with a different label. It wasn't white, it was black, and it had no writing on it at all. I stared at it. My rules didn't cover this. Log any discrepancy. This was certainly a discrepancy, but taking it out felt wrong. Touching it felt wrong. I left it there. I logged the total count as 412. I lied in my own log. I didn't know why. I just knew I had to. That night, the scraping was closer. It sounded like it was just outside my quarters. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the slow, methodical scrape of something against the hull, and I thought about the black can. The 4th day, I broke a rule. It was 10 a.m. I was on the bridge, watching the empty sea. The monitor with the diagnostic timer showed 11, 20, 13, 47. My thoughts kept drifting back to the lower lab, to the locked door. I had to know what was behind it. I went to the maintenance locker and found a crowbar. My hands were sweating. I told myself this was part of the job. Securing the vessel meant knowing every part of it. I was just being thorough. I went back to the lab. The door was still there, unmarked, locked. I slid the crowbar into the frame and heaved. The wood splintered. The lock gave way. With a sharp crack, the door swung open into darkness. A smell rolled out, thick and organic, like seaweed and rot. I shone my flashlight inside. It was a narrow storage space, maybe 10 feet deep. Shelves lined the walls, but they weren't holding equipment. They were holding jars, hundreds of glass jars, all filled with a cloudy, yellowish preservative. And inside each jar was an eye, a human eye. They all stared forward, their blue, brown, and green irises clouded by time. A shelf on the left held only left eyes. A shelf on the right held only right eyes. I stumbled back, gagging. My flashlight beam trembled, illuminating more shelves. Not just eyes, ears, fingers, a heart, perfectly preserved, floating in its jar. This wasn't storage. It was a collection. Then I saw it. On a small shelf in the back, set apart from the others, was a single jar. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. I didn't want to touch it. I knew I shouldn't, but I had to. I reached in, my fingers brushing the cold glass. I unscrewed the lid. The preservative smelled sharp, chemical. I pulled out the paper and unfolded it. It was a note. The handwriting was Barlow's. It watches through the reflections. It learns. The rules are a cage, but it is learning the bars. Do not look. Do not respond. But most of all, do not let it count you. Let it count you. What did that mean? I shoved the note back in the jar, screwed the lid on tight, and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my quarters, the door bolted shut. I had broken Rule 13. I had entered a restricted area. I had looked. At 1 p.m., I forced myself to go to the galley, the inventory. I had to do the inventory. My hands shook as I counted. 150 vegetables, 120 meat, 80 fruit, 62 water, 412. The number was the same, but it felt different now. It felt like a threat. That night, the scraping stopped. At 9 p.m., there was only silence. The silence was worse. It felt like something was holding its breath. At 2 a.m., I heard a new sound, a soft tapping, from inside the ship, from the corridor outside my door. Tap, 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 like fingernails on a metal door. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear it. It wasn't loud, it was precise, methodical. It was counting. I spent the 5th day in a state of quiet panic. I didn't leave my quarters until I had to. I did the inventory, my movements jerky and automatic. 412. The number was a mockery. The tapping had stopped at dawn, but I felt its echo in my bones. I kept seeing the wall of eyes in my mind. I needed to know more. I went back to Barlow's log, skipping ahead to the later entries. I found one from his 10th day. It knows my name now. I heard it whisper from the vents last night. Barlow. It's learning from the logs, from the systems. The rules are the only thing holding it back, but it's testing them. The food, count. It's a game to it, a way of keeping track. His 12th day entry was just a list of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Over and over. His 13th day entry was a single, terrified sentence. I saw myself in the darkened bridge window. I was on the deck, waving. His 14th and final entry was the one that chilled me to the bone. The rules are not to protect you from the ship. They are to protect the ship from you, or what you might become. I'm sorry. I broke one. I looked at the sonar. That was it. Nothing more. I stared at the page. He had broken Rule 6. I had broken Rule 13. We were both compromised. At 5 p.m., I did my radio check. Jana's voice was a lifeline. Asterisk, Andromeda asterisk. This is dispatch. Dispatch, this is Vance. My voice was hoarse. I have a situation. There was a pause. Go ahead, Vance. I found something. A room. It wasn't on the schematics. It has biological samples. Another pause. Longer this time. Vance, what is the nature of the samples? Human, organs, eyes. Copy that, Vance. Remain in your quarters. Do not leave. A team is being dispatched. What? When? ETA is 48 hours. Can you hold for 48 hours? 48 hours. That was 6 days past the end of my contract. The timer on the bridge would be at 0. What happens at 0? I asked. The contract ends, Vance. The diagnostic is complete. And then what? Then you wait for pickup. I didn't like the sound of that. Jana, there's more. The rules. Barlow's log. He said the ship is learning, that it's counting us. Vance, stick to the protocol. Secure your quarters. We are on the way. The line went dead. Her tone had shifted, from professional to urgent, but it felt rehearsed. I went to the bridge. The timer read 09, 20, 08, 11. 9 days left. 48 hours wouldn't be enough. I looked at the main sonar. Array, dark and inert. Barlow had looked. What had he seen? I felt a pull, a morbid curiosity that was stronger than my fear. I had to know. I reached for the power switch. My finger was an inch away when I heard a sound behind me. A soft click. I turned. The bridge door was closed. I had left it open. I walked over and tried the handle. It was locked. From the outside, I was trapped in the bridge. Panic flared in my chest. I pounded on the door. Hello? Is someone there? No answer. I looked at the security monitor, which showed a feed of the corridor outside the bridge. It was empty. Then I saw it. On the monitor, a figure stood at the far end of the hall. It was a man in a ship's uniform. He was just standing there, facing away from the camera. He looked familiar. I zoomed in. It was Barlow. He turned his head, and his face was a smooth, featureless oval of skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. The monitor flickered and went dead. I backed away, my heart hammering. I was trapped with the sonar, the thing Barlow had seen. I looked at the switch. I knew I shouldn't, but now I had to. I had to know what I was facing. I flipped the switch. The screen hummed to life. At first, it was just a standard sonar display, a sweeping green line in a circle. But then, shapes began to appear. Not on the seafloor, all around the ship, hundreds of them. They weren't fish. They were long, thin shapes, like tendrils, reaching out from the depths, coiling around the hull of the Times Andromeda, asterisk. And one shape, larger than the others, was directly underneath us. It was massive, the size of the ship itself, and as I watched, a single, pulsing dot of light appeared in its center, a heartbeat. The screen flickered again, and the image changed. It was no longer a sonar display. It was a list of names. I saw Barlow, A, at the top. Below it, Vance, E, my name, and next to my name, a number. It was a countdown. It started at 100, 98, 97. It was counting down. Let it count you. The note, it was counting me. I scrambled for the switch, slapping it off. The screen went dark. I was breathing in ragged gasps. I ran back to the door and pounded again, screaming now. The door remained locked. I was trapped. I don't know how long I was in there. Hours. The timer on the main console ticked down. 09, 19, 40, 22. I tried every console, every switch. Nothing worked. The bridge was a sealed tomb. I was beginning to think I would die in there when I heard the click again. The door unlocked. I wrenched it open and ran, not back to my quarters, but to the galley. I had to see. I had to know. I burst through the door and stopped. The shelves were bare. Every single can was gone. 412 cans vanished. The shelves were empty and gleaming under the cold lights. In the center of the floor, where I had found the single can of peas, was a single sheet of paper, laminated, just like the first one. The heading read, Amendments. Below it, a new list. 1. The 14-day contract is void. The diagnostic is secondary. 2. The inventory is no longer required. The count is complete. 3. All interior doors are to remain bolted at all times. Use maintenance corridors for travel. 4. Do not use the bridge. The main console is compromised. 5. The aft observation deck is now your primary safe room. All other quarters are off limits. 6. The figure you see is not Barlow. It is a lure. Do not acknowledge it. Number 7. Your name is no longer Elias. You are the Watchman. 8. Radio silence is now mandatory. The line is not secure. 9. If you find a black can, do not touch it. It is a marker. 10. It knows you are here. It knows you have seen it. The rules are now for containment. 11. At night, you must patrol the main corridor. Walk from the galley to the engine room door and back. You must do this 12 times. 12. Do not stop. Do not look at the portholes. Do not count your steps. It will be counting for you. I read the list, my blood turning to ice. The game had changed. I was no longer a contractor. I was the Watchman, Barlow's replacement. The ship hadn't been waiting for a diagnostic. It had been waiting for a new warden. My first night as the Watchman was the longest of my life. At 7 p.m., I forced down a can of beef I had taken from the bridge emergency locker. Then I went to the aft observation deck. The room was small, lined with thick, reinforced windows. It felt like a pillbox. I bolted the door from the inside. At 9 p.m., the patrol began. Rule 11. I unbolted the door and stepped into the dark corridor. The only light came from the red emergency lamps, casting everything in a bloody glow. I started walking. The corridor was 200 yards long. I reached the engine room door, a massive slab of steel, and turned back. 1. I walked back to the galley entrance. 2. I tried not to count my steps, as the rule said, but my brain did it automatically. 97 steps back. 3, 4, 5. The ship was silent, no scraping, no tapping, just the sound of my own boots on the metal deck. On the 6th lap, I passed a porthole. Rule 11. Do not look at the portholes. I kept my eyes fixed forward, but I could feel it. A presence outside. A vast, dark shape in the water, keeping pace with me. On the 9th lap, I heard a sound. A child's laugh. It came from a side corridor, one that led to the crew quarters. Off limits. I kept walking. 10. The laugh came again, closer this time. It sounded like my niece, Lily. Uncle Eli, wait up. I didn't break stride. I walked faster. 11. The sound was right behind me now, a small patter of feet on the deck. I didn't look. I reached the galley entrance and turned for the final lap. 12. I was almost back to the observation deck when the door to the lower lab swung open. The figure with the featureless face stood there. It was Barlow's uniform, but the thing inside it was wrong. It was too tall, too thin, its limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural motion. It raised a hand and pointed at me. I broke into a run, not looking back. I slammed the door to the observation deck and threw the bolt. I slid to the floor, my back against the cold metal, gasping for breath. I had done it. 12 laps. I had followed the rule. I stayed in the observation deck for the rest of the night, watching the black water outside the windows. Sometimes, I thought I saw a light deep down, a slow, rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat from the sonar. The next day, I explored the maintenance corridors, the new arteries of my prison. They were narrow, cramped, and lined with pipes. They connected every part of the ship, bypassing the main hallways. It was like being inside the ship's skeleton. I found a locker with more emergency rations and water. I also found a toolkit. I decided to go back to the bridge. The rules said it was compromised, but I needed to see the countdown. I moved through the corridors, my senses on high alert. The bridge was dark. The main console was dead, but the small monitor with the countdown was still on. 41. The numbers weren't counting down sequentially. They were jumping, random and erratic. It wasn't a timer. It was a measure of something else. My sanity? My chances? I saw another sheet of paper next to the monitor, or it was another laminated sheet. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The heading was Amendments to the Watchman Protocol. 1. The countdown is a measure of structural integrity. Yours and the ship's. Do not allow it to reach 0. 2. The patrol route is now variable. Each night, a red light will illuminate above one of 3 maintenance hatches, A, B, or C. You must begin your patrol from that hatch. The number of laps will correspond to the hatch number. A equals 10 laps, B equals 12 laps, C equals 14 laps. 3. You will find black cans appearing in non-food. Locations. These are not markers. They are listening devices. Do not touch them. Report their location by smashing them with a hammer. A hammer and safety glasses are in the aft observation deck locker. 4. The figure in Barlow's uniform is a scavenger. It seeks to reclaim discarded parts of the ship's former occupants. Do not interfere with its work. If it blocks your path, say the phrase, "The count is absolute." It will let you pass. 5. Radio silence is now absolute. The ship is mimicking external signals. Any voice you hear is the ship. 6. Your sleep is now scheduled. You may sleep between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. At all other times, you must be awake and active. 7. The observation deck windows must be covered with the steel shutters at 8 p.m. and uncovered at 6 a.m. The sequence is right to left, top to bottom. Any deviation is a failure. 8. The ship will offer you solutions. It will show you weak points, escape routes, ways to fight back. These are tests. Accepting any of them will be considered a breach of protocol. 9. You are no longer Elias. You are the Watchman. Reinforce this identity. Do not think of your past life. It is a vulnerability the ship will exploit. I crumpled the paper in my fist, a surge of useless rage rising in me. The ship wasn't just a predator. It was a meticulous, sadistic game master, and I was its only player. I was no longer a man. I was a set of functions, a list of obligations. I retreated to the observation deck, my new cell. The locker contained a heavy ball-peen hammer and a pair of industrial safety goggles. I put them on. The world became a distorted tunnel of plastic and glass. I felt less like a watchman and more like a lab rat about to be shocked. That night, a red light glowed above maintenance hatch C. 14 laps, 560 yards of walking, multiplied by 14, nearly 4 miles in the dark, with the thing in the halls and the presence in the water. I started at 10 p.m. The shutters on the windows closed, sealing me in with my dread. The first few laps were uneventful. The rhythmic clang of my boots was my only companion. On the fourth lap, I saw a black can sitting in the middle of the corridor. Rule 3. I didn't hesitate. I raised the hammer and brought it down. The can buckled, and a thick, black, tar-like substance oozed out, smelling of ozone and rot. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, a small act of defiance. On the 8th lap, the figure in Barlow's uniform appeared at the far end of the corridor. It was just standing there, a silhouette in the red gloom. I kept walking, my pace steady. As I neared it, it glided into my path, blocking me, its featureless face tilted. "The count is absolute," I said, my voice a dry rasp. The figure glided to the side, melting back into the shadows of a side passage. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. On the 11th lap, a voice echoed through the ship. It was Jana. "Elias? Vance? Can you hear me? This is dispatch, on an emergency channel. We know you're in trouble. The Andromeda isn't what you think. It's a biological entity, a living ship. We can help you, but you have to help us." I kept walking. Rule 5. Any voice is the ship. "There's a maintenance access panel on the port side of the bridge," Jana's voice continued, pleading. "It leads to an external service conduit. If you can pry it open, we can send a retrieval line through. We can pull you out, Elias. You don't have to die there." My pace faltered. An external conduit, a way out. The ship had offered me a solution. Rule 8. A test. I gripped the hammer tighter, my knuckles white. 14 laps. I had to finish the patrol. I had to follow the rules. The voice grew more desperate, more persuasive. It described my apartment, my sister, the life I'd left behind. It offered it all back. I started to run, my boots thundering on the deck. I wasn't just patrolling anymore. I was fleeing the voice. I completed the 14 laps, my lungs burning, and slammed the door to the observation deck, bolting it shut. I slid down the wall, the hammer clattering beside me. I had passed the test, but the cost was mounting. My past was no longer a comfort. It was a weapon the ship could use against me. The next day, I found another black can in the observation deck, right next to the locker with the hammer. I smashed it. The black ooze stained the floor. I was becoming good at this, good at being the watchman. I spent my waking hours exploring the maintenance corridors, mapping them, memorizing them. I was learning the ship's bones. In a small, forgotten junction behind the engine room, I found a loose panel, pried it open. Inside was a small, waterproof bag. It contained a solid-state data drive and a folded, yellowed piece of paper. The handwriting was neat, precise. If you are reading this, my name was Hayes. I was the contractor before Barlow. Barlow found my notes, I think. He was a smart man, but he was too curious. He thought he could understand it. You cannot. You can only endure. The ship is a predator of information. Every rule you follow, it learns. Every patrol you walk, it maps your patterns. Every fear you have, it tastes. It offered me a way out, too. A way to scuttle the ship, it said. A self-destruct sequence in the engine room. It showed me the console, the buttons to press. It was a lie. Activating that console doesn't destroy the ship. It feeds it. It gives it a burst of energy, a feast of data from a final, desperate act. That's what it wants. It wants you to think you're fighting back when you're really just strengthening it. Do not fight. Do not try to growl. Escape. Do not try to destroy it. Your only purpose is to be a null variable, a closed system. Follow the rules, but find a way to make them yours. Introduce a small chaos it cannot predict, a ritual it cannot learn. That is the only hope. Not to win, but to last. To starve it of meaningful input until it sleeps. That is all I could figure out. I'm sorry. I failed. I tried to fight. I sank to the floor, the data drive heavy in my hand. Haze. Another ghost on this ship. His words echoed in my mind, a small chaos it cannot predict. That night, the red light was above hatch B, 12 laps. As I prepared to leave, I looked at the steel shutters covering the windows. Right to left, top to bottom. Rule 7. An idea, cold and sharp, formed in my mind. A small chaos. I began the patrol. It was the same. The black can, which I smashed. The figure, which I bypassed with the passphrase. The voice of Jana, which I ignored. I was becoming a machine. When I returned to the observation deck, just before 4 a.m., my scheduled sleep window, I walked to the shutters. The rule was right to left, top to bottom. Instead, I reached up and closed the bottom left shutter first, then the top right, then the middle left. I closed them in a random, nonsensical pattern. There was no sound, no reaction from the ship, but I felt it, a flicker of confusion in the oppressive silence. I had introduced a variable, a piece of data it couldn't immediately process. I lay down on the floor, my hammer beside me, and slept for 6 hours. It was the first time I had slept since I arrived. It wasn't restful, but it was something. I was no longer just surviving. I was fighting back, not with a hammer or a crowbar, but with a meaningless ritual. I was trying to bore the monster to death. The days bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of patrols, inventory smashing, and shutter rituals. Each night, I would close the shutters in a new, random order. Each morning, I would open them in a different one. The countdown on the bridge screen continued its erratic dance. 73, 55, 29, 61. It made no sense. On the 8th day of my new protocol, I found something new. After a patrol, I returned to the observation deck to find a single item sitting in the center of the floor. It wasn't a black can. It was a photograph. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was a picture of me and my sister, from her wedding day 5 years ago. We were smiling, my arm around her shoulders. I remembered that day. The sun, the cheap champagne, the feeling of hope for the future. I had that photo in my wallet. The wallet was in my pack. In the quarters I was no longer allowed to enter. The ship had been in my things. It had taken my memories. It was learning faster. Rule 9. Do not think of your past life. It is a vulnerability. I stared at the photo, at my own smiling, ignorant face. A wave of grief and longing so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I wanted to go back. I wanted to be that man again. I took the photograph and placed it face down on the floor. Then I took the hammer and smashed it until it was a mess of splintered paper and fractured image. I swept the pieces into a corner, a small chaos, a denial of its gift. That night, the patrol was different. The red light was above hatch A, 10 laps, but as I walked, the corridor seemed to change. The distance between the galley and the engine room felt longer. The portholes I passed showed not the black water, but scenes from my past. My old apartment, the bridge of the container ship I used to work on, the hospital room where my father died. Rule 11. Do not look at the portholes. I kept my eyes forward, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. The ship was adapting. It was using my own defiance, my own past, against me. The random shutter ritual had forced it to change tactics. It was no longer just testing me, it was torturing me. On the 5th lap, I saw another black can. I smashed it. On the 7th lap, the figure in Barlow's uniform appeared, but this time it didn't block my path. It walked alongside me, its long strides matching my own. It didn't have a face, but I could feel its attention. It was studying me. The count is absolute, I said, my voice a whisper. It kept pace with me for 3 full laps, a silent, terrifying companion. Then, as silently as it appeared, it glided into a side passage. I finished the 10 laps, my body slick with sweat, my mind frayed. I bolted the door to the observation deck and sank to the floor. I was losing. The small chaos I had introduced wasn't enough. The ship was too vast, too old, too hungry. I looked at the countdown on my wrist-mounted timer, which I had synced to the bridge display. It read 15, then it jumped to 48, then back down to 22. It wasn't a measure of integrity. It was a measure of my compliance, my psychological state. When I followed the rules perfectly, it went up. When I hesitated, when I felt grief or fear, it plummeted. The ship wasn't just counting laps, it was counting my resolve, and I was running out.